I knew something had shifted the moment she painted our bedroom walls black. Not a metaphor. Jet black. Matte finish. I came home one afternoon to find Clara, barefoot in one of my old paint-stained t-shirts, dragging a brush along the corner behind our headboard like she was sketching a coffin. It absorbs light, she said without turning around. It's the color of truth. That was Clara. Always dramatic. Always brilliant. And, lately, always elsewhere. She'd been chasing a new idea, something about art born from emotional entropy. True creativity, she told me over wine one night, is birthed in chaos, not comfort. I laughed then, because I thought she was just musing like she always did, spinning theories while she toyed with her roasted beet salad. But then she put her glass down, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I want an open marriage, Matthew. For the sake of my work." It felt like all the oxygen left the room. What? I blinked. She said it again. Slower. Louder. Not in anger, not even coldly. Just plainly. Like she was asking to repaint the kitchen cabinets. "I think it's time we explored emotional freedom. I'm not saying I don't love you. I do. But I can't make art from stillness anymore. I need tension. I need imbalance. Fracture." I didn't know what the hell she was talking about. We had a good life. 20 years together. A son in college. A house with more rooms than we used. A garden she used to love. We'd been through hard times and easy ones, but mostly, we had peace. Apparently, peace wasn't good enough anymore. She sat across from me, legs tucked under her, hair pulled into a messy bun that still smelled faintly like turpentine. Her eyes, gray, always searching, weren't looking for reassurance. They were waiting for permission. "This isn't about sex," she said, reading the confusion on my face. "It's about experience. Tension. Distance." I didn't respond. I just kept staring at her like I could rewind time with enough focus. She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a tiny recorder. One of those sleek black ones you'd barely notice. "I'm documenting everything," she added, placing it on the table. "I want this project to be real. Raw. I want to chart what happens to love when you let it decay naturally. No maintenance. No repairs. You're using our marriage as a fucking art experiment?" "No," she said. "I'm using myself. And you're part of me." I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed beside her, staring at the cracked plaster on the ceiling. She slept like a stone, her body curled away from me, hand resting gently on her hip. She looked peaceful. I felt gutted. Over the next few days, she floated around the house like a ghost. She'd whisper into that recorder when she thought I wasn't listening. Sketch notes on scraps of paper. Photograph the mundane, me brushing my teeth, her untouched coffee, an empty hallway at dusk. And still, I convinced myself it was a phase. Clara always threw herself into her work. She once disappeared into a series about industrial collapse and didn't speak for 4 days. Another time, she blindfolded herself for a week to unlearn sight. She was an artist. She got obsessive. But this felt different. She started leaving her journal open on the kitchen table. Not accidentally, but deliberately. Phrases jumped off the page. "Matthew seems confused." Good. Today's silence felt thicker than yesterday's. I watched him watching me. I felt nothing. I told myself not to read it. Then I told myself I was entitled to. She was dragging me into this project whether I wanted to be in it or not. So I read. Every word felt like a nail hammered into the floorboards beneath me. She recorded our arguments. I knew because I'd see her thumb press down on that little red button when my voice raised. She even started baiting me, saying things she knew would get a reaction. Like asking if I'd ever fantasized about someone else. If I ever wondered what it would be like to be wanted again. I told her I wanted her. That I still did. And it was true. Even then, there were moments, fleeting, visceral, where I'd catch her brushing her hair in the mirror, or walking barefoot across the patio in the morning light, and I'd feel that low, familiar pull in my chest, that ache of longing that still burned, even after all these years. But when I reached for her, she'd pull away. "This isn't about sex," she repeated, over and over. "It's about creation." I wanted to scream that art wasn't worth this. That no canvas, no gallery, no installation was worth the dismantling of a marriage. But the words caught in my throat. And then one night, I caught her photographing herself crying in the mirror. She didn't know I was watching. She had the camera propped on a tripod, remote in her hand. Her makeup was smeared, her expression raw. But when she snapped the photo, her lips curled up into the faintest smile. That's when I realized. She wasn't documenting our collapse. She was orchestrating it. The first time I saw Lila again, It was like being yanked into a memory you didn't know still lived in your skin. She was standing in our foyer, backlit by the soft amber light from the front windows, her arms wrapped awkwardly around a cardboard box. Clara had invited her over. Something about collecting the rest of her things from Ethan's old room. I hadn't seen Lila since the breakup. Neither had Ethan, as far as I knew. He'd buried himself in studio work at school, drinking too much coffee and pretending his heartbreak was something he could paint through. But there she was, tall, composed, still wearing that faint, intoxicating vanilla perfume that used to linger in the house days after she left. It hit me the moment I opened the door. "Matthew," she said, offering a tight smile. "It's good to see you." I stepped aside and let her in, trying to ignore how her presence twisted something low and unfamiliar in my gut. "You didn't have to come all this way," I said, glancing at the box. "We could have shipped whatever you needed." She shook her head. "I wanted to say hi. I mean, to Clara. And to you, I guess." Clara, of course, wasn't even home yet. She'd lost track of time at the studio again, her phrase of choice for most absences lately. She texted me just before Lila arrived. "Let her in. Be kind. She's grieving too." Grieving. That's what Clara called it. As if a college breakup deserved the language of funerals. But I was kind. I helped Lila carry the box up to Ethan's old room. It was strange being in there. It still smelled faintly of turpentine and teenage angst. His art supplies were piled against one wall, a mix of canvases and old pizza boxes shoved under the bed. Lila knelt and pulled out a few sketchbooks she said were hers. "We worked on some stuff together," she murmured. "Just drawings. Doodles, really." I nodded and leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. She wore her hair differently now, shorter, with a copper tint that caught the light in delicate strands. Her tank top revealed a line of freckles trailing down her shoulder, and for a second, I remembered seeing that exact trail once when she and Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch watching Blade Runner, and I'd thrown a blanket over them, pretending not to notice how tightly they were wrapped around each other. I cleared my throat. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked. "Tea? Wine?" She looked up at me, surprised. "You still keep wine in the house?" I smiled faintly. "Some things haven't changed." She followed me down to the kitchen, and I poured us both glasses of red, one of Clara's obscure French bottles with a label I couldn't pronounce. We sat at the island in silence for a moment, the clink of the glasses the only sound. "She told me," Lila said eventually, "about the open marriage." I stiffened. "She did." Lila nodded. "She said it was for the sake of art, that you were okay with it." My laugh came out bitter and sharper than I intended. "Did she say why she thought I'd be okay with it?" Lila tilted her head, her eyes soft. "No, just that you two had an understanding." An understanding. That was one word for it. We sat in silence again, and something about the air shifted. I looked at her, really looked. There was something raw around the edges of her, like she hadn't slept well in weeks, like she was trying too hard to be unaffected. "You and Ethan," I started, then stopped. Lila took a sip of her wine. "We weren't right for each other. Not in the way he thought we were. But you loved him." "I did." She smiled, sad and distant. "But I think I loved who he wanted me to be more than I ever really loved him." That silence returned, thick and electric. Our knees were almost touching under the counter. Her perfume floated between us, thin and familiar. Then Clara walked in. She wore a long white linen blouse, unbuttoned just low enough to suggest recklessness. Her hair was pinned up messily, and she had charcoal smudged along one cheek like a painter's warm mark. She paused in the doorway, surveying us like a director stepping onto set. "Lila," she said brightly, "I'm so glad you came." They hugged, Clara lingering just a second longer than necessary. I noticed her eyes dart briefly to my glass, then to Lila's. She smiled. "You two having a cozy little catch-up?" "Just reminiscing," Lila said. Clara slid onto the stool beside me, resting a hand lightly on my forearm. It was the first physical touch she'd offered me in weeks. I flinched instinctively. Her fingers were cold. "You should come by the studio sometime, Lila," Clara said. "I'm working on something new. Very experimental." Lila looked intrigued. "Sure. I'd love to see it." Clara's smile widened, slow and calculating. "Actually, maybe you could model." Lila blinked. "Model? Nothing formal," Clara said, brushing it off. "Just presence. I'm exploring the tension between stillness and disturbance. The shape of longing. You'd be perfect." I felt my skin crawl. The rest of the evening blurred. Clara brought out cheese and olives, turned on some obscure Icelandic composer she liked, and talked endlessly about decay as a motif. But mostly, she watched. She watched Lila laugh at one of my jokes. She watched the way I refilled Lila's wine glass before hers. She watched my hand brush Lila's wrist accidentally and linger. When Lila finally left, Clara closed the door slowly behind her, then turned to me. "She's still beautiful," Clara said. I didn't respond. "She always made you uncomfortable, even when she was with Ethan." "Clara, she's got that soft tension, doesn't she? The kind you don't even realize is seducing you." I stared at her. "What are you doing?" She smiled faintly, then whispered, "Feeding the fire." That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not because of Clara's words, or even Lila's lingering scent on the throw pillow she'd used, but because I started to wonder. Was I already part of the art? It started with small things. A missed dinner. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A note scribbled in the corner of a sketch pad. "Collapse is more interesting than stability." I found it on the kitchen counter, wedged beneath the fruit bowl like it had landed there by accident. Clara's chaos wasn't loud. It was surgical. Precise. She didn't scream. She whispered. And in those whispers, she planted landmines. She began coming home later and later. No explanations. No apology. Just the sound of the front door opening at 1:34 a.m., the shuffle of her boots being kicked off, and the occasional faint scent of paint thinner and cigarettes she hadn't smoked in years. One night I asked her, half drunk, "Where do you go, Clara?" She didn't even pause on her way to the bedroom. "Wherever the muse is." I stood alone in the hallway, her words curling around me like smoke. I wanted to follow her, ask her what the hell she was doing, but I didn't. I let her go. That was the game, I was starting to realize. She moved the pieces. I was just trying not to fall off the board. Lila started coming around more often. At first, it was innocent. She left a sweater behind the night Clara invited her for dinner, a silky black wrap that hung from the back of a dining chair for 3 days before Clara commented on it. "Lila has good taste," she said, sipping her coffee. I nodded. "Yeah, she does. She makes you feel seen, doesn't she?" The question was so unexpected I didn't answer right away. Clara tilted her head. "You don't have to lie." "I'm not." "I think it's beautiful," she said, cutting me off. "The way something broken can still glow. That ache between two people. It's exactly what I need." And that's when I started to understand. She wanted this. She was building this. Her distance. Her absences. The tension she layered between me and Lila, it wasn't incidental. It was staged. Sculpted. She was throwing us together like flint and steel, waiting for the spark to catch. And slowly, it did. Lila and I started talking more. Texting occasionally. Then more than occasionally. She'd come by to grab more of her things, which somehow never fit in one trip. Clara always welcomed her, sometimes even left notes for her. "Lila, I left the door unlocked. Help yourself to the red wine." See? Sometimes she'd already be inside when I got home. Cooking, reading, sitting with her feet curled up on the couch like she belonged there. And the worst part? It didn't feel wrong. It felt like relief. One evening, Clara forgot about a dinner reservation I'd made for the two of us. I sat alone at that table for almost an hour before walking out. When I came home, the lights were off. A single post-it note stuck to the fridge. "Sorry. Got swept away by the storm." Don't wait up. The storm. That's how she referred to her creative process now. That night, Lila texted me. "You okay?" I don't know why I replied, or why my fingers trembled when I did. Not really. She was at the door 20 minutes later with takeout and a bottle of Cabernet. Clara was still gone. I was still angry, and the house was suddenly warm in a way it hadn't been in months. We sat on the floor of the living room, eating noodles from paper boxes, laughing about a stupid movie Ethan once loved, some dystopian mess that none of us really understood but pretended to. And at some point, between a second glass of wine and a soft glance, Lila reached for my hand. Her fingers were small, cold from the glass, but they curled around mine like they belonged there. I didn't pull away. The room buzzed. My ears rang. A sharp pulse flickered at the base of my throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was married. She was my son's ex-girlfriend. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. We weren't husband and mistress, or father and almost daughter-in-law. We were two people drowning in someone else's design. And Clara? Clara was watching. I found out later that she had installed a new security system. For safety, she claimed. but it wasn't hard to spot the small, glassy eye of a camera hidden in the corner of the room, just above the fireplace. Perfect angle of the couch, the kitchen, the hallway. When I confronted her, casually, pretending it was just a question, she didn't even blink. "You never asked if you were being recorded," she said. And I realized something else in that moment. I wasn't just part of the art. I was the subject. That week, I found her journal again, left open, of course, on the dining table. She didn't hide it anymore. It was bait. Lila's voice is warm, liquid. Matthew leans toward her without realizing it. "I think he's lonely enough now. A few more fractures, and the painting will be ready." I should have been furious. Should have packed my bags. Should have torn the house down to the studs. But instead, I sat down in that empty chair and reread the entry 3 times. And when I looked up, I saw my reflection in the glass of the cabinet. I didn't recognize him. The night Clara left during dinner was the night everything tipped. She'd made her favorite, fig and prosciutto flatbread with arugula and shaved parmesan, the kind of meal that felt like date night in a single bite. She lit candles, even poured wine. For a brief moment, it felt like a memory trying to crawl back into our lives. Then, just as I reached for her hand across the table, she stood. "I need space," she said. "Right now." Her expression was unreadable, like she was already somewhere else. "The energy's wrong. I can feel it. Something's off. Clara, sit down. Please." But she was already slipping on her coat, wrapping that old gray scarf around her neck like a noose she'd learned to love. "Don't wait up," she said as she opened the door. Then she paused, just long enough to meet my eyes and add, "You'll be fine." And she left. I stared at her untouched plate, the faint trail of steam curling up from the flatbread like something dying. The candles flickered, then steadied. Silence returned to the room like it had been waiting. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe more. Then I blew out the candles. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't chase her. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and wandered to the back of the house, the guest room now unofficially dubbed Lila's room. She hadn't moved in, but she hadn't stayed gone either. Her presence clung to the place. A scarf on the chair, lip balm on the nightstand, her favorite tea in the cabinet, next to my coffee grounds like it had always been there. The door was cracked. She was sitting on the floor, legs folded, sketching in one of her notebooks. A quiet hum played on her phone, some lo-fi thing with rain sounds and muted piano. She looked up, smiled. There was no surprise in her eyes. No guilt. "Hey," she said. "I thought you guys were doing dinner." "We were," I replied. She left. Lila nodded, setting the sketchbook aside. "She does that." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Not all the way, just enough to feel like we were inside something private. "What are you drawing?" I asked. She turned the notebook so I could see. It was me. Not photorealistic. Not flattering. Just a few jagged lines. A man hunched slightly, his head in his hands, shoulders tight with the weight of things unsaid. "You made me look broken," I said, only half joking. "I didn't make you anything," she said quietly. "You already were." That silence again, thick as velvet. She shifted slightly, her knee brushing mine. It was casual, but it lit something. "I don't know what's happening anymore," I whispered. "With her. With us. With this." Lila looked at me, really looked. "You're not the only one confused, Matthew." There was something raw in her voice, something wounded and wanting all at once. And then, before I could stop it, before I even wanted to stop it, she reached out and touched my face. It was barely anything. A brush of fingertips along my jaw, a lingering pause near the corner of my mouth. But it was the most human contact I'd felt in months. I didn't move, didn't speak. She leaned in, slowly. Not like someone seducing, like someone asking. And I let her kiss me. It was soft, hesitant. The kind of kiss that's more about relief than desire. Her lips trembled slightly against mine, and mine answered. Not with hunger, with loneliness. When we pulled apart, I didn't apologize. Neither did she. We sat there in silence, her head resting lightly against my shoulder, the sketchbook forgotten beside us. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Clara was watching. Later that night, after Lila had gone to her room and I'd retreated to mine, I walked past Clara's studio door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the light of her monitor cast eerie shadows across the canvas-strewn room. I saw the footage. I saw us. She'd already downloaded the camera feed. It played in slow motion. The kiss. the way our hands found each other, the breath that escaped my mouth when her lips left mine. Clara stood in front of the screen, her back to me. Her posture wasn't angry. It was satisfied. You watched it, I said, voice low. She turned slowly, eyes wide and gleaming. Yes. Are you proud of yourself? Her smile was terrifying. Not cruel. Not joyous. Something else. Something victorious. It's starting, she whispered. What is? She turned to a nearby easel, pulling away a thin cloth. It was the beginning of a painting. Dark. Messy. Raw lines carved into the canvas like wounds. At the center, a man slumped forward, hollowed out, hands clenched in his lap. She titled it in bold, slashed letters across the bottom. Collapse. I didn't know what she was painting anymore. Clara began working with a kind of obsession I hadn't seen in her since her early career, back when she used to lock herself in the garage for days, emerging only to scribble notes on her arm or scrawl on the kitchen walls like she couldn't stand still long enough to grab a sketch pad. But this was something else. Something darker. She painted through the night, often naked beneath one of my old robes, charcoal streaking her forearms, her hands trembling with the violence of her brushwork. There was no rhythm to it, no apparent method, just wild, manic bursts of movement, then sudden stillness, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. The house smelled like linseed oil and something rotting. I walked into the studio once, mid-morning, to find her sitting cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, rocking slightly. Around her, canvases leaned in like sentinels, dark shapes twisted into intimacy and betrayal. My face was on one of them, barely recognizable, mouth stretched in a scream I never made. I made you beautiful, she said when she noticed me. I looked away. You made me alone. She laughed. Not kindly, not unkindly, just knowingly. Same thing. That night, I told her about the kiss, about Lila, about how I couldn't keep pretending I was part of her masterpiece without bleeding a little more each day. She didn't react the way I thought she would. She didn't throw a plate. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply nodded, walked over to her desk, and pressed stop on the recorder I hadn't noticed was running. Then she said, "Good. That's where this part ends." What part? The longing. Now we move into loss. She turned away from me and picked up a fresh canvas. I stood there, stunned. You don't even care? I do care, she said softly, but not in the way you want me to. Then what do you want from me, Clara? She looked at me over her shoulder, eyes wide and cold. I want you to fall. Completely. So I can paint what it looks like when a man breaks. I laughed, harsh and hollow. Jesus, Clara, do you even hear yourself? I hear everything. She turned the recorder back on, speaking into it gently. The denial stage. He still believes this is about him. I left. I slept in Ethan's room that night, surrounded by his canvases and old posters, half-finished sketches of Lila tucked under the bed. It was like sleeping in a mausoleum for ghosts that hadn't even died yet. And Lila? She started staying later, cooking dinner when Clara didn't come home, pouring me wine when Clara did, and then disappeared into the studio, muttering about soundscapes and blood tones. Lila didn't press me, didn't ask questions. She just was. Present. Soft. Her presence became a balm when I hated needing. One night, after watching Clara paint through the glass door for hours, half-naked, music blaring, a recording of one of our fights looping in the background, I turned to Lila on the couch and said, I think I'm losing myself. She looked up at me, her eyes full of worry, then held on to me. And she kissed me again. Only this time, I didn't pull away. I didn't pause. This time, I kissed her back. It was soft at first. Careful. But it deepened quickly, hands finding hips, breath mixing, the kind of kiss that isn't about lust or even comfort. It was about not disappearing. About anchoring to someone, anyone, while your world slips beneath you like wet canvas. When we broke apart, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. But Clara knew. Of course she knew. The next morning, she was humming in the kitchen. Humming. She slid a cup of coffee toward me and said, Your guilt is radiating. It's perfect. What the hell is wrong with you? She sipped her own drink. Nothing. I'm just close. The collection is almost ready. You're painting our fucking marriage. She looked at me then, eyes sharp as scalpels. No. I'm painting what happens when comfort dies. I didn't answer. Because part of me understood. And that scared me more than anything. Over the next week, she started assembling her pieces, pulling together canvases, rearranging the studio. She brought in speakers, looping audio clips of our arguments, her whispered journal entries, the soft, breathy moans I didn't recognize until I realized. They were mine. Mine and Lila's. She had recorded everything. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. You didn't ask not to be recorded, she said. You're destroying us. No, she replied. I'm revealing us. And then she did something that shook me more than anything else. She showed me the piece she'd titled Mother. It was a painting of Lila, not as I saw her. Not soft, not wounded, but powerful, seductive, predatory. She's your inspiration now, Clara whispered, brushing her fingers along the painting's edge. You gave her what you couldn't give me anymore. I looked at the painting, then at Clara, and finally, at myself in the mirror beyond her shoulder. And I realized, I was the only one who didn't know I'd been cast. It wasn't supposed to become real. That was the first sentence in Clara's new journal entry. I know because she left it open on the desk, the way you leave a knife out when you want someone to know they're not safe anymore. She'd titled the entry, Phase Shift. And below it, in that looping, elegant scrawl I used to love tracing with my fingers, she wrote, Matthew is slipping away, faster than anticipated. Lila is no longer just a device. I underestimated the power of longing once it becomes reciprocated. There was more, paragraphs describing our intimacy like it was part of a lab study. Notes about softness, reliance, emotional rooting. She was writing like a scientist, like a voyeur. Like she had never been married to me at all. Except she had. And now, for the first time, it seemed to actually bother her. I saw it in the way she avoided eye contact at breakfast. In the way she knocked over a cup of coffee and didn't swear, just stared at the spill like it was a premonition. Her hands shook when she thought I wasn't looking. Her brush strokes had changed too, more erratic, less controlled. The lines she once crafted with surgical grace now bled across the canvas, messy and loud. Control was slipping, and not just from me, from her. Meanwhile, Lila moved into the guest room full-time. Not with ceremony, not with permission, just with quiet consistency. A bag, then a suitcase, then a toothbrush that never left. She was careful, respectful. She didn't invade. But her presence began to echo through the house in ways I couldn't ignore. Folded laundry on the armrest, her hairband on the doorknob, the smell of her skin on my pillow when I hadn't even realized she'd been in my room. And somewhere in all of this, amid the chaos Clara claimed to crave, Lila and I fell into something that felt disturbingly close to peace. It started on a Tuesday, one of those gray days where the sky looks bruised and everything tastes like silence. Clara had locked herself in the studio for nearly 24 hours. I'd brought her food, left water at the door. She didn't answer. Lila found me in the hallway, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, head resting on my knees. You okay? She asked. I shook my head. She knelt beside me. Her hand found mine. We didn't say anything. Not for a long time. Eventually, we got up, walked into the living room, and curled up on the couch beneath the old blanket Ethan used to claim as his. We watched a movie we didn't finish. She rested her head against my chest. I felt her breathing slow against me, soft and trusting. And then we made love for the first time. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was gentle, almost reverent. We touched each other like two people who hadn't been touched in months. Not just physically, but emotionally. Her body fit mine like it had been waiting for this exact version of me. Bruised, wary, but open. I whispered her name like it was a question. She answered me with her breath. Afterward, we stayed tangled together on the couch, her fingertips tracing lazy circles on my chest, my hands cradling the back of her neck like I was afraid she'd disappear if I let go. Clara found us the next morning. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. She stood in the hallway, watching us like we were figures in one of her own installations, too still to be real, too intimate to be posed. Then, she turned and walked away. Later, I found her in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, her canvas torn to shreds around her. Her journal pages scattered like confetti, some of them half-burned, others soaked from the hose she'd turned on for no reason. She looked at me, not with rage, not with sadness, with disbelief. I thought I was orchestrating this, she said. But you hijacked it. No, I said, stepping closer. You made a world where love couldn't breathe. We just found air outside of it. She stared at me. You love her? I hesitated, then nodded. I didn't mean for you to actually, she choked on the words. She was supposed to be a symbol, Matthew. Not a fucking replacement. She's not a replacement. She's a choice. Clara turned away, laughing softly. It was the saddest sound I'd ever heard. You were never supposed to choose. For the first time, I saw it, fear in her eyes. Not fear of being abandoned. Fear of being irrelevant. Because her masterpiece was no longer about decay. It was about displacement. She had curated the chaos, expecting to survive it unscathed. But artists don't control what the medium does once it's alive. And this was alive. That night, Lila and I made plans to leave. Not in whispers. Not in secret. We talked in the open air of my bedroom, with the door half closed and the sound of Clara pacing the hallway just beyond it. I didn't care anymore. Not about being recorded. Not about being watched. The exhibit was no longer hers. And that terrified her. The next morning, Clara called her gallery. "I'm ready," I heard her say. "Tell them the installation is complete." But when I looked at her hands, I saw the tremble. And I realized this wasn't a triumph. This was a woman bracing for her own collapse. The invitations were handmade, naturally. Heavy cardstock, frayed edges, Clara's signature scrawled in ink that bled slightly into the fibers, just enough to look accidental, though I knew better. Everything she did was deliberate. She called it Anatomy of Decay. A private preview before the official opening. A few gallerists. 2 well-known critics. A handful of her art world sycophants, dressed in carefully ironic black and sipping from etched glasses of rose. She didn't invite me. But Lila got one. Folded neatly on her pillow, tucked inside a black envelope. Clara's handwriting on the front. "To the Muse. You've earned your spotlight." Lila read it silently, then handed it to me without a word. I stared at the paper, fingers tightening around it until the corners crumpled. "She knows we're leaving," I said. Lila nodded. "She's not trying to stop us," I added, half to myself. "She's trying to immortalize us." That evening, we went. Against our better judgment. Against every instinct that told us this was a trap. But curiosity is a powerful poison. And Clara had always known how to dose it just right. The gallery was in a converted textile factory, a place Clara had once called romantically industrial. Tall ceilings, cracked floors, exposed beams. The kind of space that begged for drama. And Clara delivered. The first room was nearly empty. Just a looping audio installation, voices layered over each other, whispering, rising, arguing. Her voice. My voice. Lila's. Fragments of our private hell echoing off the cold white walls. Overlapping dialogue that sounded like secrets screamed into water. "Where do you go when you leave me? You're not listening. I want to feel again now. Please don't leave. Is this what you wanted?" Click, click, click. The sound of a recorder stopping. Starting. Stopping again. I froze in the doorway. My chest tightened. Lila grabbed my hand. "Let's keep moving," she whispered. The next room hit harder. Paintings. Dozens of them. Massive canvases hung from the ceiling by wires, like bodies suspended mid-autopsy. The colors were violent. Swaths of crimson, bruised purples, sickly yellows. Shapes emerged from the chaos. My silhouette, contorted. Lila's lips, parted in a scream or a moan. I couldn't tell. Clara's eyes, duplicated across several pieces like she was always watching. One wall featured a diptych titled, Before/After. Left panel. Me and Clara. Our wedding photo rendered in shadow and ash. Our faces half erased, hands nearly touching. Right panel. Me and Lila. Not a photo. A scene. Recreated from memory or surveillance. Us on the couch. My arm around her. Her head on my shoulder. A moment so intimate it made my stomach churn. "How did she?" Lila started. "She recorded everything," I said. But the worst was the installation in the third room. It wasn't paintings, or audio, or video. It was us. Found objects. My old hoodie, ripped at the shoulder. A crumpled post-it note from our fridge, gone painting. "Don't wait up." A broken coffee mug. Lila's scarf, still faintly scented. And at the center, under a spotlight, Clara's wedding dress. Slashed, hung like a martyr on a wooden cross. There were whispers behind us. The critics murmuring words like visceral and bold and unflinching. One of them, a woman with bright red glasses and a notebook tucked under her arm, leaned toward the man beside her and whispered, "This feels real. Like, too real. Is this actually her marriage?" And that's when I saw it happen. Clara stepped into the room, barefoot, wearing paint-stained linen, eyes bright and unblinking. She didn't address us. She addressed the audience. "I wanted to capture what it means to rot," she said. "To document beauty as it unravels. Love, when stripped of obligation. When it's left to fend for itself. What do we become when comfort dies? When connection frays? What's left behind? She gestured to the room. This. Someone clapped. Others followed. It was quiet. Uneasy. But applause nonetheless. Clara smiled. But her eyes flicked to me. Then to Lila. And the smile wavered. Because that's when she realized. We weren't crying. We weren't angry. We were already gone. Not physically. Not yet. But emotionally? We had left weeks ago. Clara stood there, basking in what she created, and for the first time, I saw the cost of her genius. Not on canvas, but in her eyes. She thought she'd curated decay, but what she'd really done was isolate herself inside of it. And when the crowd began to disperse, champagne flutes empty, notebooks full of adjectives and admiration, Clara turned her back to them, walked straight past me, paused just long enough to whisper. You were supposed to be broken. I met her gaze. No, I said. I was supposed to be yours. And then Lila took my hand. And we walked out. Clara used to say that love was a conversation. A long, evolving dialogue between two people learning each other, again and again. But by the time the exhibit went public, Clara had stopped speaking to me altogether. Not a single word. She moved through the house like a specter, quiet, deliberate, but no longer performative. The cameras stopped recording. The journal disappeared. The lights in the studio stayed off. She was unraveling in silence. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even triumphant. But mostly, I just felt sad. Lila and I spent most of our time in my old office, converted into a makeshift living space. We talked about the move, researched apartments, sometimes just lay side by side in bed, listening to the house creak as Clara walked the halls above like a ghost counting steps between rooms that used to mean something. One night, Lila said what I'd been thinking for days. We should go. After the show opens, I said. Why wait? Because I didn't want to be the villain in Clara's final scene. Because leaving before the crowd even gathered felt cruel and somehow cowardly. But truthfully, I was waiting for her to say something. To stop us. To ask, beg, scream, confess, anything. Just to prove she still saw me as more than a subject. But Clara had grown quiet. Until she didn't. It was a Thursday afternoon when she finally confronted us. I was standing in the kitchen, washing dishes, my sleeves wet, my thoughts miles away, when she appeared in the doorway. You're leaving, she said, flatly. I turned. Lila had just walked in behind her, arms full of folded clothes. Clara's eyes darted between us. You're really going, she repeated. Not just sleeping in the same bed. Not just touching each other when I'm not looking. You're leaving. Lila set the clothes down carefully. We didn't want it this way. Clara ignored her. Her gaze was locked on me. Cold. Empty. Tell me when you decided I wasn't real anymore. That's not it, I said quietly. You stopped being my wife a long time ago. You made this into something else. Something cruel. She stepped forward. You were mine, Matthew. Every emotion. Every breath. I built an entire body of work around you. You were my canvas. And I stopped consenting to that the moment you turned my pain into performance. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. I made you eternal. No, Lila said, stepping beside me. You made him lonely. There's a difference. For a second, I saw the shift in Clara's face. The flash of something human pain, maybe, or the horror of realizing the knife she'd sharpened for art had cut her own throat. Then it vanished. She smiled. It was small. Sad. You were supposed to wait until the show opened. We're not props, I said. Clara's eyes filled with something new. Neat. Please, she said. Please just wait until opening night. I need this. I need people to see. To understand. Lila shook her head. They'll see. And they'll understand. But we won't be there for the fallout. Clara took a step toward me. Her voice cracked. Don't do this, Matthew. Don't let her rewrite us. She didn't rewrite anything. She just gave me back the pieces you tore out. The silence that followed was thick. Breathless. Then Clara turned to Lila, like a switch had flipped. She'll leave you, she said calmly. She'll get bored. She's younger, but she has a history of outgrowing people. Clara, I started. She used to be in love with your son, she continued. Eyes locked on Lila now. You think that kind of woman sticks around? Lila flinched. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Clara took one more step, close enough now that I could see the red lines etched into her eyes from sleepless nights. You'll come crawling back, she said to me. When she leaves. When the silence gets too loud. No, I said. I already lived in your silence. I'm not doing that again. She stood there for a moment longer, breathing hard, waiting for something, rage, remorse, anything that could anchor her to the story she thought she was still writing. But we gave her nothing. So she turned around and left the room. That night, we packed. No drama. No last-minute tears. Just bags and soft steps and the kind of exhaustion that follows prolonged grief. We didn't say goodbye. We just left. The house was quiet when the door closed behind us. No shouting. No slamming. No final monologue from the artist who once thought she could choreograph the collapse of her own life without consequence. In the car, Lila took my hand. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her. Her face in the golden wash of streetlights. The faint scar on her lower lip I'd never asked about. The way her thumb traced mine. "Yeah," I said. For the first time in a long time. As we pulled away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Just a shadow against the sky. A structure filled with ghosts. Clara stood in the upstairs window, watching. Alone in her masterpiece. The gallery buzzed. Glass clinked. Soft jazz drifted through the high-ceilinged space like perfume. Critics and collectors mingled in little knots, wine in one hand, programs in the other, their murmurs a hive of curated interest. Clara stood at the center of it all. Draped in black silk, hair pinned like a crown, face painted in warm tones that almost made her look alive again. If you didn't know what this exhibit was, if you didn't live it, you might even call her beautiful. Radiant, even. But I had seen that radiance up close. And I knew it wasn't light. It was fire. Consuming everything. Including her. Lila and I didn't go. We stayed at a modest Airbnb in a quiet corner of the city, halfway between nowhere and beginning again. She made tea. I played music on my phone. And we watched the minutes tick down toward the opening reception like you'd watch the countdown on a bomb you didn't plant, but knew you'd feel when it went off. At exactly 7:23 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She did it. But people are asking questions. Attached was a photo, the gallery, full to bursting, eyes on the centerpiece painting collapse. And there, in the lower corner of the frame, me. My face. Clear as daylight. Lila leaned over my shoulder, lips parting in shock. "She really used your face." I nodded. She wanted the audience to feel it. But they might do more than feel it. She was right. By 8:15, the first tweet went viral. A photo of the diptych, me and Clara on the left, me and Lila on the right, captioned, "Is this performance art or emotional abuse?" 50,000 likes in an hour. A Reddit thread followed. R/contemporary art. My professor says Clara Monroe's new show is emotional cannibalism disguised as genius. Thoughts? The comments came fast. Angry. Awed. Horrified. She exploited real people. Is the other woman even okay? I thought this was all fictional. Wait, is that guy her actual husband? Then came the blog posts. Think pieces. One headline read, "When does art become consent violation?" Another, "Exhibit of the year or public breakdown? Clara Monroe's brutal self-exposure." And finally, the death blow. An anonymous art journalist posted a full breakdown of the installation. Included in the piece? A still from the security footage of Lila and me on the couch, kissing. The post included a quote from someone at the opening. She said the subjects were complicit. But that man? He didn't look like a collaborator. He looked like a hostage. The comments turned. Fast. By midnight, Clara's phone must have exploded. Her gallery's Instagram disabled comments. Critics started issuing clarifications. And the gallerist who once called her a revolutionary voice in post-relational abstraction now said, vaguely, that the artist had been exploring deeply personal material that might not have been fully processed before presentation. They were scrambling, distancing themselves from her, from us. Because Clara had done what few artists ever dared, she painted truth. But she painted it without permission. I didn't hear from her. Not that night. Not the next day. But I watched the art world backpedal with a blend of unease and vindication. She had gotten what she wanted. Attention. Relevance. Infamy. But not admiration. And definitely not control. Because the audience had turned. And they weren't just questioning the meaning anymore. They were questioning the morality. Lila stayed quiet through it all. She didn't read the articles, didn't respond to the social media tags. She deleted her old accounts. Bought a disposable phone. She said she didn't want to be seen through Clara's lens anymore. I understood. We had coffee on the fire escape the next morning. The sky was a warm gray, the kind that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. "She's going to spiral," Lila said softly. "She already has," I replied. A long pause. Then she said, "I think she loved you." In her own way. I looked down at the street. The motion of the world below. People going about their lives, oblivious to the masterpiece unraveling just blocks away. "I think," I said, "she loved the idea of me." Another pause. And when I became real, she didn't know what to do with me. Later that day, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no body text, just an attachment. A photo of Clara, alone in the gallery after closing. The paintings were still hung, the lights still on, but the crowd was gone. Her heels were off, discarded in a corner. She sat barefoot in front of the final piece, a self-portrait. It was her, painted as a reflection in a shattered mirror. Around her, torn photographs of me, of Lila, of Ethan. Her wedding ring embedded in the paint, stuck just under the surface of the canvas. It was titled, "Still Life." There was a line scrawled in the corner, a sentence only I would understand. Turns out, pain does make great art, but no one wants to live in a masterpiece. The gallery was empty, not quiet. Empty. There's a difference. Quiet is the pause between songs. Empty is when the record player breaks, and you realize the music isn't coming back. Clara sat in the center of the main room, barefoot on the concrete floor. The lights were still on, casting long, pale shadows across the walls. The paintings remained hung, some slightly askew from the night's frenzy. A wine glass lay shattered near the back wall. No one had bothered to clean it up. And in front of her, the last canvas. Her self-portrait. She'd painted herself not as she was, but as she saw herself now. Fractured, splintered, 1,000 tiny versions of her face reflected in sharp angles of imagined glass. There were family photos glued into the paint, some of them torn, others smeared as if by accident, but clearly, deliberately ruined. And beneath it, scratched faintly in silver ink. I curated my own extinction. The exhibit had been closed early. Officially, they cited emotional distress expressed by participants depicted in the work. Unofficially, no one wanted to be attached to the story anymore. The gallery distanced itself. Her sponsors pulled out. The collectors who once begged for exclusive rights to her pieces now whispered about boundaries, ethics, consent. The press turned their eyes elsewhere. The chaos that had once burned so brightly. The love triangle turned installation. The woman who weaponized intimacy had become old news. A spectacle with no new chapters. And Clara was left alone in her masterpiece. I hadn't spoken to her since the preview night. I didn't plan to, but I still saw her. Not in person, in the news feeds, in the art forums that now debated whether her work was genius or cruelty. In the sudden price drop of her previous collections, the way she became less of a name and more of a cautionary tale. And sometimes, in my dreams, in those, she's still painting, still whispering to that little recorder, still asking, "Do you feel it yet?" And the truth is, I do. I feel all of it. Lila and I moved. Nothing dramatic. A smaller apartment, a quiet neighborhood. No cameras. No canvases. Just shelves filled with books, tea-stained mugs, and late morning sun that poured through the windows like forgiveness. She never asked me to talk about Clara, but one morning I did. We were on the floor, eating toast, and laughing about something forgettable when I said, "I don't think she meant to lose everything." Lila looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "But she still did." I nodded. We sat in that truth for a while. Then we moved on. A few weeks later, I got one last envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photograph. Clara, in the empty gallery, facing the mirror in her final painting. Her reflection layered over her painted face. It was a striking image. Still, lonely, real. Tucked behind the photo, a handwritten note. Asterisk, "I loved you, but I love the echo of you more. I hope she loves the real thing." Asterisk. No signature. No return address. Just silence. I didn't show the note to Lila. Not because I was hiding anything, but because it didn't need to be shared. It wasn't a threat. It was a relic. Something pulled from the wreckage. A fragment from the ruins of a performance that burned too bright and lasted too long. I put the letter away. Didn't burn it. Didn't frame it. Just folded it into a drawer and walked out into the afternoon sun. Hand in hand with the woman who saw me. Not as a canvas or a concept, but as something living, breathing, flawed, whole. Clara's show never reopened. Her name still echoes in some corners of the art world. Sometimes with awe, sometimes with disgust, often with both. But no one really talks about the pieces anymore. They talk about the story, about how a woman destroyed her marriage in pursuit of truth, about how she turned her husband's heartbreak into paint and sound and film, and about how, in the end, she created a masterpiece so complete, she couldn't live inside it. And neither could anyone else.